This is Roger Stone for American Sovereign Bullion. Since 2020, the U.S. dollar has lost over 20% of its purchasing power. Meanwhile, gold continues to rise. Call 844-272-2428 or go to asbgold.com now to get your free gold and silver guide and learn how to protect your wealth with physical gold and silver delivered to your door or held in a gold IRA today. So go to asbgold.com now. Don't wait for the markets to drop. That's asbgold.com.
This is Full Court Press with Sean Spicer.
Sean Spicer will be getting a new position.
A decorated veteran, a political strategist, and he knows Washington inside and out.
Just like Sean Spicer.
The Spicer era.
Sean Spicer.
The Full Court Press is on the air. Now, here's Sean Spicer.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome to Full Court Press with Sean Spicer here on WABC. Happy Easter to everyone. I hope you're getting some time to reflect and enjoy this Easter Sunday. There's definitely a lot of issues that we are dealing with as a country and as a world. Today hopefully reminds us, though, of what the big picture is. This idea of what our lives are supposed to be all about, what we're supposed to be living for, who we're supposed to be living for, and how we're supposed to be conducting ourselves. And I sometimes maybe just because of the way I'm wired, I get off in tangents and I start to think about what's happening in this country and some of our policies, and if they connect maybe more than maybe I overthink it. How's that? But I do think it's important to think about what we're doing. And I was listening to a lot of these snap polls after the president addressed the nation Wednesday night. And if you think about why we do things, there's a lot of times when it comes down to economic issues, or this is truly to make the world a safer place. Yes, there are some economic benefits. I get that. I'm not going to deny that. But at the end of the day, what this is really about is keeping the world safer. They're a group of people who for 47 years have threatened us, have threatened their neighbors, have threatened the world. We have the opportunity to stop that and stop those capabilities from hurting us. One of the things that was interesting in President Trump's address, though, was he said, and this is so true with so many of the policies, there's a lot of things that presidents of both parties talk about and then do nothing. I support this. I'll never do that. I mean, you remember during Trump's first term, he moved the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem and everybody freaked out. You can't do that. You're only supposed to talk about it. You're not actually supposed to follow through with your promises. And he mentioned in this speech all of the things that Iran is attributed to having done to us, from the coal bombing to all of these other attacks on our bases, our men, our servicemen and women, individual civilians. And they were condemned, rightly so. And then really nothing. In fact, Obama gave him $1 billion in cash on pallets. So, I get asked this all the time, and I'm sorry if I brought this up previously. Why is Trump doing this? We don't need another forever war. And he ended the speech by talking about those. You don't think he doesn't know that? You don't think that he knows what he promised the American people and why he detests these foreign wars? But when you're president, you can detest a lot of things, but at the end of the day, you have to do what's right for the country. And what I think was so fascinating is the easy answer, and just keep this in mind. Every time someone says, why is Trump doing this? What is he? The easy answer is to do nothing, to absolutely do nothing. But he cannot do, that's the situation where he recognizes that there's a threat, that Americans will be killed, and that you can choose to do nothing and probably keep your political capital and your political popularity, or you can face some consequences. And he's chosen to act. And I think that's worth something to me because, again, I recognize this, and I hope you do too, that the easy answer sometimes is to get away and kick the can down the road and say, well, the next administration will deal with that. How many more Americans have to die? I want to play you, though, and he did. He framed the thing in context. We've been at this now 30 some odd days. He ended the speech talking about this, but I think I want to go after how he started. Take a listen to how he kicked this whole thing off.
As we speak this evening, it's been just 1 month since the United States military began Operation Epic Fury, targeting the world's #1 state sponsor of terror, Iran. In these past 4 weeks, our armed forces have delivered swift, decisive, overwhelming victories on the battlefield. Victories like few people have ever seen before. Tonight, Iran's Navy is gone. Their Air Force is in ruins. Their leaders, most of them terrorist regime they led, are now dead. Their command and control of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is being decimated as we speak. Their ability to launch missiles and drones is dramatically curtailed, and their weapons factories and rocket launchers are being blown to pieces. Very few of them left. Never in the history of warfare has an enemy suffered such clear and devastating large-scale losses in a matter of weeks. Our enemies are losing in America, as it has been for 5 years under my presidency, is winning, and now winning bigger than ever before.
The key part about that is he says tonight Iran's Navy is gone, their Air Force is gone, their leaders, most of them are now dead. Their command and control of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is being decimated as we speak. The reason that's important is because they cannot reconstitute even the ballistic missile capabilities that threaten us, never mind their nuclear capabilities. He has stopped that. But it's really interesting because one of the other things that has gotten a lot of attention on his speech, and by the way, before I get to that, one of the things that I thought he'd start with that he didn't, but I want to play it for you because Marco Rubio, just 2 days prior to that on Monday, was on with ABC. And he was going back and forth on to why we're there, and he laid out the exact objectives. Take a listen to Marco Rubio real quick.
This operation, okay, and that's what this is about very specific objectives. The president laid them out on the first night of the operation. I'll repeat them to you now because I hear a lot of talk about we don't know what the clear objectives are. Here they are. You should write them down. Number 1, the destruction of their Air Force. Number 2, the destruction of their Navy. Number 3, the severe diminishing of their missile launching capability. And number 4, the destruction of their factories so they can't make more missiles and more drones to threaten us in the future. All of this so that they can never hide behind it to acquire a nuclear weapon. That was our objective from the beginning. That remains our objective now. We are on pace and, in fact, ahead of schedule on some of those things, and we are going to achieve those things in a number of weeks, not in a number of months.
I tweeted that out. So if you're sitting around later today having Easter brunch or dinner and someone says, what are we doing in Iran? Well, Uncle Ed, or whoever it is, you can pull this up on my website, on my X account. I just tweeted it, so it's there for you to go remind yourself. But those objectives are very clear: Army, Navy, military capabilities, and the destruction of their factories so they can't make more missiles and drones to threaten us in the future. Full stop. Sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? One of the other things that I loved about the speech, though, and I know maybe I'm not supposed to say this. It's Easter, so I don't know. Maybe I'm not allowed to talk about, but I got to do it. I'm so sick and tired of these European countries whining about what the United States should be doing. All of these countries whose fuel has gone up, fuel costs, and are complaining and denying us access to their airspace, to their bases, to their countries. Not that they're doing anything, just to even operate. I'm sorry. President Trump made this point in the speech, and I want to underscore it because I actually spoke with him in the Oval Office about this. The United States gets 2% of our oil from the Strait of Hormuz. 2%. We have plenty of oil in the United States. If we wanted to drop oil prices right now, the dirty little secret is the president could put an export ban on today. Our prices would drop, their prices would skyrocket. Now, apparently, I've talked to some pretty smart people, and there's some reasons why that might not be a long-term good idea. But in the short term, I think it would be brilliant. And the Europeans would suddenly suffer, and they would suddenly care a lot more about the Strait of Hormuz. It's them who get their oil from there. Obviously, all of this affects the world market, which is kind of how this all links to us. But if we simply wanted to solve this, we could walk away and say there's an export ban. If you make oil in the United States, you have to keep it here. Boom. Pretty easy, isn't it? But he's not doing that yet. And these whiny little babies are telling us what we need to be doing. Now, remember, Iran, in theory, was striking not just the United States and our service members and our citizens, but Europeans, all NATO countries. In theory, it is kind of an Article 5 thing. An attack on one is an attack on all. Some reason NATO needs to be very involved in Ukraine because why? Well, because Ukraine and Russia border them, so they care a lot more. So suddenly the U.S. should be much more concerned about that as an issue. But when it comes to Iran and the threat that they pose us all, no one cares. Now, the reason I say all this is because these whiny little babies, for decades, didn't live up to their NATO commitments, which was 2% of GDP towards your own national defense. So essentially, all you had to do in your NATO commitment was spend your own money on yourself to build your army, your navy, so that collectively we were strong together. That was the idea, right? It was like a relay race. Everyone needs to be in shape so that we can run a strong race and you're not counting on one person. Instead, using the relay race objective, they all sat around at the buffet, got fat and drunk, and said, you can run really, really fast. Why don't you run the race and we'll just kind of walk a couple paces. And now they want to tell us to work out more. Keep the analogy going here. Trump's calling them out. Where are you guys? They killed your citizens too. These oil prices affect you too. Where are you? And I mean, I'm just telling you, he made it very clear. He said, number one, buy from the U.S. We have plenty. And number two, build some delayed courage. Go to the strait and take it. You have to start learning how to fight yourself. The USA won't be there to help you anymore, just like you weren't there for us. I mean, again, I know it's not pretty. No, it's what we're not, but it is what it is, and that's what we're supposed to do. Now, here's the interesting thing, because I know everybody, yes, Trump has a deal in hand. He wants to get a deal. I don't think the Iranians want one, folks. I'm just going to be straight with you. That's the problem. It's not Trump. Trump's a deal man. He wants a deal. He wants to negotiate something, a settlement. He gets it. I don't think you've got that capability with the Iranians. I really don't. It's just not there. That's the problem. But people are so confounded by this. Oh my God, I'm so confused by what Trump's doing. Why is this confusing? The best analogy I read the other day was in a anonymous quote by a senior staffer. Usually not fans of these, but it was funny and apt, so I'll share it with you. And they said, Trump usually has one hand extended to shake your hand and the other hand closed to punch you in the face. I thought, now that is a perfect analogy, because he wants the deal, but he wants it on our terms. They can never have a nuclear weapon. They have to give up their capabilities and their enrichment processes, etc. That's the deal. They cannot pose a threat to us again. But start looking at the dots, folks. The USS George W. Bush Strike Group started sailing into the region. That's 3 carrier strike groups. The USS Tripoli headed that way. The Air Force has deployed a bunch of the A-10s, close air support. So what I tell people all the time is cut through the noise, the social media comments, the interviews, the utterances, and connect the dots. Okay? 3 strike groups. I don't think I've ever, I'm just trying to think. I graduated from the United States Naval War College. I don't remember a time outside of Pearl Harbor. I mean, World War II, I'm sorry, not Pearl Harbor, but in that aftermath of Pearl Harbor. Or even then, I'm just trying to think if we had 3 strike groups in one area. This is serious firepower, folks. Serious firepower. And so I'm just telling you, connect the dots. Stop paying attention to the noise as far as what's going on and then what. And again, you think about a lot of those assets that I talked about. This looks like an air invasion, has all the hallmarks of one. So today on the show, I want to do 2 things, though, now that I've gotten it out of my system on Iran. One, I want to get back to politics. I want to talk to you guys. The New York Times has sued the Department of Defense, Department of War, Secretary Hegseth, because they put on additional restrictions, and they're claiming that all of their constitutional rights are under attack. This is just blatantly not true. Tim Parlatore is a good friend and lawyer for President Trump, but he's also a Naval Reserve JAG officer who has been very involved in this. He's going to talk to us right after the break. And then Brilyn Hollyhand is a leader in the movement in the Republican National Committee's youth organization. He is the chair of their coalition. I want to talk to him about how that's going to affect the election, because obviously young voters were important. So before we go to break, real quick, I reminded you this last week. My brand new book, Trump 2.0, comes out in just a couple weeks. It's available for pre-order on Amazon right now. Go to Amazon, order Trump 2.0. The president actually wrote the foreword. I got a chance to meet with him in the Oval Office to talk about it. He signed it. If you go to Amazon right now, Trump 2.0, you'll get it on the day that it comes out in just a few weeks. Anyway, we'll be back right after the break. This is Full Court Press with Sean Spicer.
This is Full Court Press with Sean Spicer on 77 WABC. Listen to this podcast now
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Why is the middle class shrinking? Why are people facing an affordability crisis while marginalized individuals called informals grow in numbers? Join me as I travel the world, speaking with people living in invisibility, the leaders working to solve it, and uncovering the hard truths shaping our economy and daily reality.
Download all of Red Apple Media's podcasts right now through your favorite podcast platform.
Ever feel like your brain just won't click? Onnit Alpha Brain is a daily supplement engineered to support memory, focus, and mental speed. Made with science-backed ingredients, Onnit Alpha Brain helps you lock in, tune out distractions, and stay sharp. See what your brain can really do. Visit onnit.com and shop Alpha Brain to unlock your next level. That's ONNIT.com.
I get so many headaches every month.
It could be chronic migraine, 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more.
Botox, onabotulinum toxin A, prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine. It's not for those who have 14 or fewer headache days a month. Prescription Botox is injected by your doctor. Effects of Botox may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions, including ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
Why wait? Ask your doctor. Visit BotoxChronicMigraine.com or call 1-800-44-BOTOX to learn more.
Hey marketers, listen up. Before this, there was this. Our voice. It's how we shared knowledge, build communities. Well, guess what? Voice is back. That's why Spotify Advertising has published a new report, The Sound On Era, because audio moves culture forward. And if your brand wants to be heard, you need a Sound On strategy. Go to ads.spotify.com to download The Sound On Era and turn up the volume on your business.
The Full Court Press is on the air. Now, here's Sean Spicer.
Welcome back to Full Court Press with Sean Spicer. I am your host, Sean Spicer, here on WABC. Happy Easter Sunday to you. As I said before the break, really got to dig deep and dive into this issue. The New York Times is claiming their constitutional rights are being attacked. Their First Amendment rights as a media organization. Democracy's dying in darkness. It's all crumbling. Everything's horrible. The world is falling. I don't know if that's entirely true, though. So apparently, when Secretary of War Pete Hegseth came in, they made some changes to how the press could access the Pentagon. Gee, really? You think maybe from a security reason that might be a good idea? Anyway, to break down what's really going on, I want to bring in Navy JAG officer, all-around good guy in the civilian world, managing partner of the Parlatore Law Group, Commander Tim Parlatore. Tim, good to be with you. Thanks for joining us on this Easter Sunday.
Hi, good morning, Sean.
Good morning. So, for those of us who aren't watching the situation, let me just start with this. I want you to paint us a picture. When the media, prior to Secretary Hegseth coming in as Secretary of War, walk us through real quickly what the situation was with the press with respect to access to the Pentagon.
So when we came in, the press had free reign over the entire building. They couldn't necessarily get into locked offices or spaces where classified material was, but free reign over all the hallways. They could just walk in and swipe in the front door and just wander around. If they wanted to spend all day just camped right outside the secretary's door, they could. Camped right outside the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff door, they could. Watch everything that's going on, see who's coming in and out, eavesdrop on conversations in the hallway. And they were open about this. Barbara Starr, talked very openly about how
CNN
got a lot of her news. She would she'd walk around the hallways and then just talk to people and try and get them to tell her things that were going on, non-public information. And, they also didn't have any identifying badges or anything that would let you know who they are. So I remember, very early on in the administration, I was walking down the hall with the then acting general counsel of the department, Charlie Young. We were having a conversation, obviously nothing, classified out in the hallway, but I realized that this guy walked up right next to us and I looked over. I happened to recognize him, that he was a journalist. If I hadn't recognized him, I would have thought it was just another, department employee just, going on his way. And as soon as I recognized the guy, I said, Charlie, let's talk inside, because that's what they were able to do back then. And it was
but just to add, so someone's listening and saying, okay, so they can walk around a building. As far as you know, though, is there any other government building in the executive branch that's possible?
No.
Okay.
It's not possible on any other military base. It's not possible in any other, department headquarters. It's not possible at the CIA headquarters, main justice. And also, and this is an important point, it's also not something that you can do if you are a military officer who's not assigned to the Pentagon.
Explain that.
So any other military member, if you're not assigned to the Pentagon and therefore have your key card, keyed so that you can swipe in, everybody else has to get a day pass. They have to undergo a background check. Even though they have a top secret clearance, they have to undergo the background check by the Pentagon Force Protection Association. And then when they show up, they may or may not have unescorted access. So even admirals could potentially show up and get a red badge and have somebody escort them around. Now, the Pentagon's kind of a confusing building, so it's not necessarily a bad idea for a visiting officer to have a red badge and an escort, but we give journalists more free reign over the Pentagon than we give our own military members who possess top secret clearances.
That's important to understand. I mean, I want to break down two things. The first one, and I hadn't heard this before, I hadn't thought about this before until you just said this.
Yeah.
If you are a journalist and you drive up to Fort anything, Fort Belvoir, Fort Bragg, Fort Myers, Fort Dixon, or any naval base, and you say, hi, I'm with the Washington Post, I'd like to come on base. They can't just do that.
Correct. No, they have to be pre-cleared. They have to have an authorization from the PAO's office. They often will have escorts. I remember when I was trying the Gallagher case out in San Diego, they used to gather them outside the gates, and then they would escort them in kind of in a group, and they would have minders to make sure that they stayed within that general vicinity of the courthouse. They couldn't go wandering around the piers or where the ships are or anything like that. So, yeah, I mean, that's the way it is everywhere else, everywhere but this one building.
Yeah, so that's the military side. And then I wanted to hit on the executive side because, again, this is so important what you're saying. If you go to the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Energy, all the way up to the White House, you don't just get to wander around. If you get access, you're either escorted in, or in the case of the White House, and I can speak to that, obviously, you get a badge, you get to go into the press room. They've got a little workspace in the back, and that's it unless you're escorted.
Correct.
Well, I mean,
Exactly.
this is what I find so fascinating about this. Is the one place, maybe outside the Department of State, but let's be honest, I don't know even half of those people know what they're doing there. The Department of Defense is where our war plans are. It's where our classified information is. And yet we are the most open and free with that one agency than all of the rest. It seems ironic that that's the case.
It is, and that was the shock that Secretary Hegseth had when he came into the building. Yeah, even having a career in media such as he did, he walked in and he thought, "How is this possible? Who allowed this?"
What dope did that? So let's get to the brass tacks then. So he walks in, he sees this, he says, "Who's the dope that did this stuff? Like, these are our war plans." And I mean, to your point, what people have to understand, I think, and I apologize sometimes if we overlook the obvious, but like, if you sit outside the chairman's office or the secretary's office, it's like sitting outside the president's office or any other principal. If you see 10 people from the Indo-PACOM area rush in, you're going to be like, something's happening there. Something's going on there. Or, you see a bunch of your folks, the JAGs run in, someone's going to get in trouble. Something's bad's happening, right? There's someone who broke the law or is getting, you can start to put get the breadcrumbs together, and you can't do that anywhere else. So you guys recognize this problem. Hegseth says, "Hey, Parlatore, get over here. What the hell's happening?" And then, so what do you guys propose? What is it that you say, here's how we should operate going forward?
So the initial draft policy came out in September. It was drafted by career Pentagon lawyers. It was not as tight as I would have liked. And so it was open to misinterpretation. So we then adjusted it for the October version, which was much more explicit in what the restrictions were. So first we had kind of restricted that they couldn't access the whole building. They were only able to get into certain areas. And of course, you may recall there were all the articles at the time about the unprecedented assault on the First Amendment by restricting them to certain hallways. Then we put out this policy that made them have to wear badges that clearly identified themselves as media. And,
wow.
and then we put in more robust security measures that said what they could or couldn't do in the building. And so we wrote it in a way that would protect all First Amendment protected activity, all legitimate news gathering activities. However, it was written to restrict their ability to engage in things that fall outside of those constitutional protections. And really
like
where this comes down to is there are laws that Congress passed, not the Pentagon. Congress passed laws criminalizing certain conduct by government employees. And so if a government employee releases classified information, that's a crime. If they release something called controlled unclassified information, that's a crime. Basically, the disclosure of any non-public, confidential government information that has not been cleared for release by the appropriate authority is a crime by a government employee. And so what we did was we put it in there that, hey, if you're going to have access to the building, you cannot use that access to go up to people in the hallway and ask them to commit a crime.
Fair enough, right? So in other words, I can't ask you to break the law and to give me something that I shouldn't have.
Correct. And to be clear, there is, the Constitution has absolutely protected journalists who receive unsolicited information. If the Pentagon Papers was the case that the Supreme Court focused on this. If a department employee approaches a journalist and says, "I would like to hand you this top secret document," the journalist is well within their right to receive it, read it, publish it, put it out on the internet, do whatever they want with it. They are constitutionally protected in that way. But that's based on the department employee approaching them and offering it. If the journalist were to turn to a department employee and say, "Hey, I would really like to get my hands on this. Can you go get me a copy?" Now the journalist has solicited criminal activity, which is itself a crime. Now, we've we kind of sidestepped that piece of it. Like we didn't want to put it into the policy that, the solicitation of criminal activity is itself a crime, because that's not something that is our job. That's a Department of Justice call. And so we wrote this policy to specifically only address that, hey, if you do these things, you're going to lose your access to the building. We didn't want to scare people with, if you do something like that, we're going to make a criminal referral or something like that. And we don't want to. That's not our focus. Our focus is just on protecting the information. And if you're the type of journalist that's doing that type of activity, then we just don't want you in the building.
Okay. And again, all common sense makes sense. How does the media react to that? How do they, what is there? Because again, the way you hear this, and this is the way I open this segment, they said, oh no, they're asking us to approve our stories. We're going to write a story about Hegseth or policy, and then we have to submit it to somebody at the Pentagon for approval. That's not true, correct?
This is how they earn the nickname fake news. That's totally false.
I think they earned it a few other ways, but
believe it or not, that was the policy for many years. The policy for many years during World War II is a credentialed journalist signed an agreement where they would submit their stories to the Department of War's Office of Censorship for pre-publication review. So that used to be the policy, but it hasn't been the policy since the 40s. So,
right. But under the policies that you guys put forward to them, that was not the case, right?
No, it never was the case. Well,
that goes to this question, which is then they what? They went to court and said what?
So they didn't bring that argument up in court, but basically what they did in court, which is what they've also done in in their op-eds, is they take the policy and they have creatively reimagined things to try to twist the meanings of things and make it cover things that it does not cover. So they went to court and essentially argued that our regulations about don't solicit somebody to commit a crime in the hallway means that if they attend a press conference, that they're no longer allowed to ask the secretary or the chairman questions during the press conference, which is so far outside the realm of plausibility. Right. It's got nothing to do with anything that we put into that policy. It's completely insane. But all of this litigation has been over these constitutional provisions that, quite frankly, I agree with. Most of what the judge and the plaintiff's lawyers said, I agree with those constitutional provisions. I just don't agree that it is in any way tethered to this policy. Yes,
okay, so the New York Times,
no problem.
Of course, sure. I don't think anyone has a problem with that, and we can always say no or no comment. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and Secretary Hegseth and some of these briefings have said that the President of the United States will say it. I'm not going to tell you that. He loves saying that. So the court, they go to court. The New York Times sues you guys. The judge rules at least somewhat in their favor in the sense that, again, I don't think it was on the merits of the case, but so where do things stand? What did the judge say you guys have to do? And then what have you done?
So what the judge did was very abnormal. He ordinarily what a judge would do is they would vacate the policy. They'd say, this policy is unconstitutional. Here's why I think it's unconstitutional. And they would kick it back down to the agency to say, you have 7 days to write a new policy that, that conforms with my guidance, essentially.
Okay.
The judge here decided not to do that. He took our policy and did the judicial equivalent of a line item veto, where he just went through and every paragraph that the New York Times didn't like, he just struck it out. And so he essentially took our policy and said, you have to give them access, but everything about security, information security, all that stuff, and anything having to do with, accountability or, what do you do if somebody breaks the rules? We're going to just get rid of all those sections. And then he said, now this is your new policy that has zero security protections whatsoever. Now you are required to immediately issue passes to all the New York Times journalists.
Okay. And what'd you do?
So what we did in response is we spent the weekend. He issued that on a Friday afternoon. New York Times wants their passes back Monday morning. We spent all weekend rewriting the policy. And so Monday, we put out a new revised policy that took every single thing the judge said and incorporated it in. And which ultimately, it required it to become much longer, where the sections, for example, the one we've been talking about, do not solicit, this information. We rewrote it as the intentional inducement of unlawful activity. And we made the description much longer. And then every single creative misinterpretation that the New York Times journalist and the judge came up with, we put them all in a list. And we said, to be clear, it does not mean this. It does not mean this. It does not mean this. And so we rewrote the policy so that it would very, very, very specifically focus on the things that we have legitimate security interests in, and then disclaim all of their fanciful interpretations. So, and what's
them to a new space, right?
Did that, right. Well, yeah, that's the other thing we did is we also moved them to a new space because of all of this back and forth and all of the issues of the court trying to get rid of our security measures. Something that we had planned anyway. In fact, something that we had telegraphed in the original policy was that we were going to move Correspondence Corridor and get them a new space that had better Wi-Fi access, that actually held cell phone reception. And so we implemented that. And so we moved the press office out of the main building into an annex. And when I say annex, it's about 30 feet away from the building. It's not that far away. In the library and conference center, into a space where they actually have cell phone reception. So it's actually a better space for them. And we then said, when you come in the building, you're going to have an escort. We made it the same as the White House, as every other executive branch building. And they immediately ran back to court to say, making the Pentagon look like every other executive branch building is an unprecedented assault on the First Amendment.
Of course. Yeah, we can't be like everyone else. Let me ask you the real question, though, which is sort of like in business, they talk about like KPIs and all this. Like,
yeah,
has the amount of leaks and classified information gone down since you did this?
Significantly. Massively. That ultimately... This, we didn't just change things because the secretary looked around the hallways and said, wow, that's weird. Yes, he said that's weird, but we didn't change it immediately based on that. We would have done that the first week if that was the cause. No, we saw significant, serious, classified information walking out of the building, and it was weekly, sometimes even daily, that Sean Parnell would get calls from journalists, particularly the New York Times, giving almost real-time updates on things that had happened in classified briefings and saying, hey, we heard that, fill in the blank here. And It was insane. But the moment we implemented this new policy in October and all these journalists voluntarily turned in their press passes and deported themselves out of the building, it stopped dead.
That's what matters.
Sure that there have still been some leaks of classified information, but the frequency has gone down massively.
Yeah.
So the policy works.
Well, look, I mean that's what matters, Tim. That's what matters. I appreciate you being with us on this Easter Sunday. Thanks for your service to the country. Thanks for what Secretary Hegseth and the whole team there at the Pentagon is doing to keep us safer as a country, prosecuting this epic fury operation. Again, I appreciate it. Thanks for everything you're doing. Thanks for your time this morning. You've been listening to Full Court Press with Sean Spicer here on WABC. We'll be right back after the break.
This is Full Court Press with Sean Spicer on 77 WABC.
Nobody wants to get catfished by dating profiles or big wireless carriers with hidden fees. Your one true match? Visible Wireless. It's one-line wireless with unlimited data and hotspot for just $25 a month, taxes and fees included. Now that's a green flag. And it's fully digital, so you can switch as fast as you swipe. Tap the banner to learn more. Terms apply. See visible.com for plan features and network management details.
How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Tap the banner or visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
Where's your playlist taking you? Down the highway? To the mountains? Or just into daydream mode while you're stuck in traffic? With over 4,000 hotels worldwide, Best Western is there to help you make the most of your getaway, wherever that is. Because the only thing better than a great playlist is a great trip. Life's the trip. Make the most of it at Best Western. Book direct and save at bestwestern.com.
Springfest means more sun, more fun, and more free at Lowe's. Keep your yard in line with an additional free Ego 56-volt battery when you buy a select Ego mower, trimmer, or blower. Plus, keep landscaping fresh with Stay Green 1 cubic foot garden soil, 5 bags for $10. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 4/8 while supplies last. Selection varies by location. Soil offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii.
Welcome to your personal briefing. The full court press is on the air. Now, here's Sean Spicer.
Well, good Sunday morning. Welcome back to Full Court Press with Sean Spicer on WABC. Happy Easter. I hope you are having a great, blessed morning. Thank you for spending some time with us on this Easter morning. It's been an interesting show. We talked a little bit about Iran, then we talked about what's going on in the press with Commander Tim Parlatore. I want to get us a little bit focused on the election now. A young man by the name of Brilyn Hollyhand I met a few years ago. He's now at the ripe old age of, I think, 19. He's got a brand new book out talking about how we can dialogue better. He was appointed to the RNC's committee to bring young people into the party. Brilyn, how are you? Good morning. Happy Easter.
Sean, good morning. Happy Easter to you and your awesome family. I so appreciate you having me, and I appreciate you endorsing the book as well. You're the first person to endorse the book, and it's already helping on the bestsellers list, so you're a rock star.
Oh, that's awesome. Let me ask you this. Trump did phenomenal with young men after in the last election. What was the reason that you put your finger on why?
It's really simple. The left for decades has had this monopoly on Gen Z, and they acted like they were entitled to our votes. While at the same time, they were lecturing us to sit down, to shut up by calling our masculinity toxic and calling us Hitler Juniors because we would wear a red MAGA hat. So at some point we woke up. At some point we smelt the roses and said these lies, these empty promises, we've been strung along for decades and been given nothing in return. Unfortunately, all the Democrats want is a voter base that's not going to push back. That's not going to call them out. They demand that they get illegals votes because they know they're going to get nothing back from those people that they're allowed in this country. They thought they could keep Gen Z silent and have their votes. And Sean, the opposite happened. We started speaking up. We started demanding actual change. And we saw the one guy that could bring change to this country, because he'd already done it before, was President Trump. President Trump won the young male vote in droves. Now, the one area we still have room for improvement is the young female vote. But I think a lot of change can come just because the exact same situation in the past few months. The left has tried to tell young female peers of mine that it is empowering and feminist of them to not have a family, to not get married, to not want to one day have that aspiration, that they should just focus on themselves, to be independent-minded. And that just same thing, just like calling our masculinity toxic, is going to backfire on the left.
By the way, you know why I think they do that with women? Every poll I see says married women vote more Republican, or become more conservative. I think once you have a kid, you realize the impact of policies in a different way. I think the left doesn't want them to get married because they realize that that's when they lose them. They can keep them single and bitter and with like 18 cats. No offense to cat ladies. It's funny because poll after poll, Brilyn, it's funny. I literally, every time I have a pollster on, we talk about the demographics, like where are who's doing, where's President Trump, and white women in particular. Go look at these rallies. Look at what's going on in Minnesota. Look at all these other things. You'll notice a preponderance of middle-aged white women. That's the issue. But I think the one thing that I was intrigued in your comment, and this goes along with your book about how you talk about make America talk again. I think one of the things that President Trump did wasn't just like when you describe the issue, I think of it a different way. He didn't just present policies. He went there. He met them where they were. He went on their podcast, not their podcast, but podcasts that they listened to. And so traditionally in a campaign, you go run your CNN, your Fox, ABC, NBC media ads. I think President Trump met voters where they were, especially young voters, and that made a difference.
You're exactly right. And you've known this. You've seen this from behind the scenes. Kind of some inside baseball for you and your audience. On the very first day working for President Trump, they asked me how to get the youth votes. And I said, well, Mr. President, with all due respect, the days of taking out an ad in the back of the Sunday paper to whenever voters are over. You've got to go where Gen Z is, and that's online. And I said, well, he's already chronically online. Like, he tweets too much. What do you mean? And I said, well, posting in his own social media app is an echo chamber. Go to where Gen Z is. That's their TikTok For You page. That's their favorite video game streamers platform. Places where they're not looking for politics, but politics is going to come find them. That's how he won. He went on everybody's favorite podcast. He went on their For You page. But bigger than that, what you just said, he went to the college campuses. One of my favorite stories of President Trump, we walked into Bryant-Denny Stadium before one of the biggest SEC football games of the decade, where Bama played Georgia. They were number 1 and number 2. And it was this crazy game. And a whole extra layer got added because Trump announced that he was going to show up. And he walked into that stadium with Hank Williams Jr. and Kid Rock and John Daly and stood next to me and threw out hot dogs in the student section to students. Everybody's going crazy. Everybody's freaking out because their president came and saw them and talked to them and listened to them directly. Kamala Harris lectured us through a phone screen. President Trump used social media, but he also went to the campuses. He made that connection, and that's why he won.
So what's a For You page? I'm showing my age.
For You page is like your timeline on social media. It shows you what is the algorithm shows for you.
So where do I see that?
It's like if you're on Twitter and you're just scrolling through your homepage, or if you're on Instagram and you're scrolling through Reels, it's naturally meant for you.
Okay, so in other words, it's that thing on the side that's serving you up ideas to look at. Okay, I thought there was something completely different. But you also said something that was interesting, too, that I didn't even think about, because all these kids now, not in the same way that I did growing up. Like, I had an Atari growing up. You put a little thing in, you played the game, you pulled it out, you switched. If you wanted to play Pong, you put the Pong cartridge in, and you played the game. Then if you wanted to play Space Invaders, you put the Space Invaders cartridge in, played that. You guys are all online now, and you mentioned meeting voters where they were in their video games. So you can literally run ads on video games.
No, and we did more than that. President Trump at one point was complaining that young people weren't watching his rallies. And I said, well, sir, people can't afford gas. They can barely afford rent. College students aren't paying a cable subscription on top of that. So you can go on Hannity show as much as you want. You can do as many primetime rallies as you want. Gen Z is just naturally not going to see it on primetime TV. But if you partner with some streaming platforms, when they log on at night to go play their favorite video game or watch their favorite YouTuber, you're natively going to be at the top of the homepage because you'll have the biggest attendance, and people can watch that. And I can't tell you the amount of people, when I went back to high school the next week for classes, that came up and they were like, could you believe Trump's rally last night? He was calling all these names and all these jokes, and like he actually had a plan for gas prices. These people didn't even know Trump was running for president the week before, but they went on to not watch a rally, to watch their favorite streamer, and they saw a video of Trump's rally on that video game website, and it worked.
So, Brilyn, again, you talk about making America talk again in your new book. The thing that frustrates the heck out of me, I got to be honest with you, like it's killing me. You and I sit around and have this conversation. Like, here's what he did well. He listened, and the guy's a businessman. So it's like it's literally metrics. Okay, who do I need to reach? How do I need to reach him? Okay, like he digests that stuff really easy because it's not like, to him it's business. It's like, tell me where the market is. Like, who are my buyers, right? Who are my customers? And I sat as a Virginia voter last year watching these knuckleheads run all of their ads and do nothing to reach out to influencers. And then here we are getting ready for the midterms, and I see the same playing happen again. Why is it that President Trump got it and I just don't see it? Or maybe I'm not seeing it, but I don't get the sense that members of the House and the Senate that are up are using the same playbook.
No, you're spot on. It is a problem, and it's not like something we could ignore. The simple answer to your question is when I offered President Trump help, he happily took it, and he listened to me. And he didn't be like, oh, this high school student has some ideas, let's entertain him and then chalk it up. He legitimately put people on the task of executing these ideas. When I meet with House members or senators that are in jeopardy in their seats and they're begging for help, and I give them ideas like start their TikTok account, like show behind the scenes of what they do daily, like film videos walking off the House floor and say, hey, this is what I accomplished for you this week. They think it's silly and stupid and they refuse to do it. They think they're above that. If the commander in chief of the United States can sit down with video game streamers and get back in office and it works successfully, the least you can do is film a selfie video. But these people don't want to do it. I offered to help some of the same races in Virginia that you're talking about. And they said that they wanted to put all of their fundraising into newspaper ads and TV ads. And how did that work out, Sean?
Believe me, and I'm with you. I could not believe, because Brilyn, I'm going to tell you the dirty little secret that I've been exposing now for the last year. Consultants don't make money off of ideas that people like me and you give them. There's no 15% commission off of reaching out to young people, going on podcasts, doing all the stuff that you said. They get 15%, 20% sometimes when they make a media buy. They don't get it when they talk to me and you. And so the consultants hate the idea because there's no ROI for them. If they were listening beyond the selfie videos, and I get that. I see like people like Mark Wayne Mullen, he clearly gets it. Eric Schmidt, senator from Missouri, he clearly gets it. Ron Johnson clearly gets it. There's a bunch that are doing this, but by and far, I think you're absolutely right. These guys think I'm too above doing this. But what issues, if they needed to talk about things that matter, like a lot of young people obviously didn't just think it was cool that the president talked to them, but he talked about issues that matter. So as we enter these midterms, what are the issues that they should be highlighting?
Sean, I spoke on 10 campuses last semester and did 10 separate debates all across the country, conservative campuses, liberal campuses, high economic campuses, low economic campuses. Every single stop, the number one issue that came up was students can't afford to buy a home when they graduate college. They can't afford to start a family.
I knew you'd say that. I knew it.
The number one thing.
And that's
so President Trump talked about that. He said he'll do an executive order, but it's got to expand upon that. Congress needs to reinforce it. They need to codify some stuff, and he needs to hit the trail. And I've said this to the president's team, and I think you'd agree. He needs to go to campuses, not do debates Charlie style, but book the basketball arena, pack the campus full of students, and say, here's the laundry list of accomplishments that I did for you, because this crazy novel I did, Sean, we have a president that actually did what he said he was going to do. Come and show his report card and say, this is what I did for you. And if you give me 2 more years, this is how I'm going to make housing prices come down.
Exactly. I mean, and I think the problem that I see right now is that a lot of these polls show that young men in particular are willing to give the president a chance, a shot. Hey, you're talking to us. You're singing our song. But now, as we head into the midterms, they're not as fired up. And there's some attrition and erosion among that group.
And I think it comes from people, when I look them in the eye at a debate, and I'm like, well, President Trump did this. And they'll go, but it was just an executive order. And to them, it's meaningless. It didn't do anything for their life. It's just a piece of paper that he signed with a fancy seal at the top. They want more out of Congress. So I think a lot of the frustration's at Trump, but it's really on Congress's lack of action. And at the end of the day, the buck stops with him, so they're putting the blame on him. They're saying, well, he should have his Republicans more in line. And Sean, you know how that works. It's not gonna be the easiest thing in the world. But I think if we expect to win the midterms for Congress, and Trump's going to help, Congress has to do their part. Republicans in Congress that we gave the chance of a majority to have to step up and say, Gen Z's demanding these things. President Trump's delivered on these things. Let's codify it so they actually see it happen in their lives.
Right. You wrote this book, Make America Talk Again. In the last minute and a half that we have, are you convinced America wants to talk again? Like, I'm not convinced. I think that's probably the right thing. What you're asking for is that we should communicate more. We should talk more. But I don't get the sense that people want to anymore. I feel like it's very tribal.
A few months ago, Sean, I would have agreed with you and said that they don't. But after Charlie's assassination, going to these campuses, having these debates with people, I've been with Trump on a campus. I've been to campuses myself for debates with Charlie. I've seen what it looks like. It's night and day difference. Like, every single stop was packed, from Harvard to Clemson to Alabama, places you expected and places you didn't expect it. People want to talk. And sometimes they want to scream and debate, but what I heard overwhelmingly, students would write 2 versions of every paper they turn in, when they believe in and when they're writing to appease their professor. And all they want to do is hear how they can finally stop tucking their tail and actually share their opinions. And Charlie inspired that, and that's why we wrote this book.
So it's interesting because I did, after I left the White House, now granted this is 2019, I probably did 20 stops, and it was scary, like how they didn't even want the existence on a campus. Do you think that there's more tolerance now?
There's definitely not more tolerance. There's more people wanting to make it happen. But the campuses are less tolerant than ever, and there's more protests than ever. And I didn't even realize how many death threats one person can get until I did this tour, just being honest with you.
No, I know it personally. I'm sorry you had to find that out yourself. Anyway, the book by Brilyn Hollyhand is Make America Talk Again. He obviously has been on these campuses. He's seen it firsthand. He understands what it's like. He has spoken to the president about how to reach out to young folks, which are part of that key winning coalition. Brilyn, happy Easter. Thanks for being with us. Good luck with the book.
Happy Easter, my friend. I greatly appreciate it. Have a wonderful weekend.
You bet. All right, guys, thanks for spending part of your Easter with us here on WABC. This has been Full Court Press with Sean Spicer. As always, you can catch me every single day on my YouTube page, Sean M. Spicer. I do a live show every morning, 8:30 to 9:30, called The Huddle. And then again, every night, The Sean Spicer Show. As I mentioned a minute ago, the president has written the foreword for my brand new book, Trump 2.0. You can go on Amazon right now and order Trump 2.0. Thank you for being with us. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you back here next Sunday on Full Court Press with Sean Spicer.
This is Greg Kelly. Donate now to Toys for Tots, which works year-round. Go to toysfortots.org. Toys for Tots supports children in need throughout the year with programs like the Toys for Tots Literacy Program. Established in 2008, it has provided over 63 million books to disadvantaged children. The Toys for Tots Literacy Program is committed to providing disadvantaged children with direct access to books and educational resources that enhance their ability to read and communicate effectively. Go to toysfortots.org.